Well, good evening. It's good to see you. What a cool thing that you guys do. Invade Wheaton campus and like have some fun in the meantime, right? It's okay. It's okay to have fun in the meantime. I am so happy I get to be here and do this, to launch this evening tonight. And sure, I'll let you do whatever you need to do. Thanks, dude. Let me pray. Father, as I get to kind of be the lead-off batter tonight for this conference, we've already had some fun videos and great music. Lord, I would ask that right from the start of this conference that this would be for you. Would you be pleased with what you see in us and hear in my message tonight? And so this is yours. We set apart this room for purposes of God alone. We set apart this messages for purpose of God alone. We set apart ourselves for purposes of God alone. In Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let me start with this. Years ago, there was a conference like this one for youth in Denver, Colorado, and there was a youth pastor in Montana that was taking a group of kids down to Colorado for this youth conference. And he had a van. Now, some of you showed up in like a really cool air-conditioned bus with TVs in it or something like that. Well, he just had like an old Ford van that didn't have enough room for the luggage. And so he took a 4x8 sheet of plywood, a big piece of wood, put it on top of the van, drilled holes into the roof of the van, and made that his car top carrier. So when all the kids came, he threw the luggage on top of the van, threw all the kids in the van, and they drove through Montana and Wyoming. And there was one lonely kid from Wyoming who didn't have a ride, so they were going to pick him up. And so they had this prearranged place where at a exit by a gas station where they were going to pick up this kid. And this was before the cell phone era. And so he had to stop at a payphone to say, okay, we're just a couple exits away. And teens, what happens when the youth pastor stops at a gas station? What do you want to do? Like get out and go buy some Mountain Dew or something, right? Well, the youth pastor, he made everybody stay in the van, which they absolutely hated him for but he said, we're just 2 stops away, and all I got to do is make a phone call. And so he made them all stay in the van. He grabbed his briefcase, satchel, man purse kind of thing, where he had a whole bunch of money for the registration and for the food for the drive and his own person. He had like over $1,000 cash. He had his credit cards. He had a lot of stuff in this satchel, plus the phone number for this kid. And so he goes to the phone booth. He makes the call. He says, hey, we're just 2 exits away. He gets back in the van and he heads down the road. They show up at the place where they're going to meet the kid. He says to his youth group, okay, you guys can go buy your sodas and snacks, whatever you want to do. Everybody rips out of the van, and he grabs his satchel but his satchel's not there. That briefcase. No, I left it in the phone booth. That's like got everything in it, a bunch of money, credit cards, registrations, that's got everything in it, without saying a word to his youth group. I mean, they're all off scattered again. Without saying a word to his youth group, he jumps back in the van, pushes that thing into gear, and rips a U-turn in the parking lot of that gas station and just goes flying as fast as he can back up that exit ramp, around the corner of the exit ramp, screaming. He was breaking the speed limit, but it's Wyoming, so there was nobody there to notice. And he was just screaming down the freeway. He pulls around the off-ramp, comes flying into the parking lot, screeches to a halt, runs out of the van, runs over to that phone booth. There it is. There's the satchel. He found it. He comes out all relieved when he hears a little voice from the top of the van say, "Wow, that was quite a ride." The youth pastor looks up and he said, my knees about went out from under me, and he said, "Tell me you were alone up there." "Yeah, I was alone." "Oh, what were you doing up there?" The kid said, "Well, you told us we could get our money to go buy sodas. My money was in my duffel bag on top of the van, and so I crawled up there to get my money when all of a sudden we were going..." Do you ever feel like your life is being driven by a crazy youth pastor who's going too fast? Do you ever wonder who is really in control of this whole thing called your life or this world? I was 15 when, any 15-year-olds here? All right, you're not very excited about it, but okay, that's all right. I was 15 and I went to a conference like this, and I have to tell you the truth that when I walked into the door, I didn't know if I wanted to follow Jesus or not. I'd grown up in a Christian home. My dad was an Alliance pastor. I knew all the right stuff to say. I had given my heart to Jesus as a little boy, and as a little boy, I meant it. I really did want to give my heart to Christ. But then I became a teenager, and the friends that I had, they didn't have the same heart that I had. They didn't have the same beliefs that I had. They tried to get me to do drugs and alcohol and all sorts of things that they wanted me to join them in. And for about 6 months, as a 15-year-old, I didn't know who I wanted to follow, and I didn't know who I wanted to be. Would I follow Jesus, or would I follow the crowd? Jesus, the crowd. Honestly, I didn't know. And I'll tell you what, it's a miserable place to be stuck in that middle zone. Doing the Jesus thing at church and then following the crowd at school, and do the Jesus thing at church and follow the crowd. What an awful life. But I didn't know which I wanted. I came to this conference, a lot like this one, about this many students, an auditorium a lot like this. And I was sitting toward the back. And that night, as the speaker stood up there talking, the Holy Spirit started talking to me. And I am so grateful that on that night, I said a yes to Jesus that was very significant. That rather than live in this, I'm not sure which place I want to be in, I gave my heart fully to Christ. I have never regretted that decision. I invited him to, so to speak, take control of that driver's seat of my life. You drive this thing, Lord. I trust you. I don't want to drive it. I don't want my friends driving it for sure. Jesus, I want you to drive this thing called my life. The theme passage of this week is well chosen. I love this passage of Scripture. I think it'll be on the screen. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. The Son is the image of the invisible God. Jesus is the image. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. The firstborn over all creation. That firstborn can mean like the first one in time, but also means like the first in rank. He outranks everything in all creation, outranking all creation. For in him, in Jesus, all things were created. You were created, the stars were created, the planet was created, the mosquitoes were created. I'm not sure why, but everything was created by Jesus. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers, we're talking like demons and angels, authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. We exist for him. The birds exist for him. And the ocean exists for him. Everything is for him, whether we realize it or not. Verse 17, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is what keeps this world from spinning apart. And he is the head of the body, the church. That's you and I, those who've given our hearts to Jesus Christ. He's the head of the church. I'm called the president of the U.S. Christian Missionary Alliance, but I ain't the head of nothing in the sense that Jesus is the King, the Lord, the one who is in charge. He is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything, would you say these last words with me together? He might have the supremacy. That in everything he would be supreme. That he would have the primary spot. That Jesus is above all. He's over all. He's greater than all. He's before all. He's the creator of all. He's over any government, he's more significant than your Twitter or Snapchat account. He's more powerful than any army or any demon army. Jesus and his has an everlasting kingdom. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom that cannot be taken away. No election can vote him out of office. No poll can influence his significance. No army can overthrow him. Nothing. He has no competitors. Some of us have the misconception. Some of us have learned a lie somewhere that says Jesus and Satan are equal powers fighting against each other. Not even remotely true that they are equal powers fighting against each other. No. Jesus reigns supreme. All others, Satan, demons, all others are way below his authority, his power, his beauty, his everything. Jesus is supreme in this world, in this universe, for all eternity. The question is he supreme in your life? That's the question. We know that he's supreme over all creation. We know that he's the King, the Lord, the Master. But what I don't know is whether he's the King, the Lord, the Master of your life. Because you might be like me when I was 15, not really sure which life I wanted to live. And so I'm coming to us tonight with this wonderful fact that the King of the universe wants to be King of your life. And in his kindness, he lets you decide. He could force himself on us as king and make you obey him. He could be that dictator ruler that just says you must, and you have no choice but to be a robot just doing whatever he said. No, he could do that, but he didn't. He gives us a choice because you know what kind of king he is. He's the King of love. He wants to have like a real relationship with us, a loving relationship where we get to know him. I was in North Africa a few months ago, and I was having breakfast with this man in North Africa who had been trained as a military fighter up in the mountains of his country. He was being trained as a terrorist. As we were having eggs that were seasoned with like these wonderful spices, it was amazing breakfast. As we're having this breakfast of eggs, he turns to me and said, "I was trained to kill you," and then he went back to having his eggs. But he said, I had two problems up there in the mountains. One, I really didn't want to kill people. And two, I wanted to get to know God. In Islam, I could get to know about Allah, but I didn't. You don't have a personal relationship with God in Islam. I wanted to get to know God. And then a thought came to him. Can you believe that the Spirit of God can speak in a terrorist cell? The thought came to him, if I just found a Bible, maybe I could get to know God. He had never seen a Bible, had never held a Bible. It took him 6 years to get a hold of a Bible. That's how oppressive some governments are in their fear of people following Christ. But it took him 6 years to find a Bible. When he finally did, he read it with great eagerness. He came to believe that Jesus is the King. He gave his heart completely to Christ. And he found that you really can have a personal relationship with God. Today, that man, just to finish the story, is a doctor of philosophy, teaching philosophy in a university system in North Africa, and the pastor of this little church that's just starting in this Muslim-dominated nation. Jesus reigning in human hearts that say yes to him so that we can have a relationship with him. Well, that decision I made as a 15-year-old was powerful for me. I went back to my high school. I said, Jesus, I just need one friend. And he gave me a Christian friend. And we lived the Christian life in that school. We started a Bible study together at the school and just tried to, well, we did. We lived the Christian life in that place that wasn't real friendly to some Christians. But I went to Crown College, one of the Alliance schools in Minnesota. There I met my wonderful wife, Joanna, that we've been married now for 34 years together. Yeah. And I was a pastor, as Yang mentioned, in the Christian Missionary Alliance in Minnesota and in Washington and Oregon, and loved getting to do what I did. But then I ran into a bit of a challenge that I want to tell you about tonight. Let me just explain what I'm doing. In your walk with Jesus, there are going to be times when you're tempted to take that steering wheel back. You're going to be tempted to say, I'm not really sure if you're doing a very good job driving, and so I think I'm going to take over again. Let me tell you a story about that in my life. My wife, Joanna, and I were pastor and wife at a church in Salem, Oregon, raising our 3 wonderful kids, Andrew, Anna, and Josiah. Loved being parents of these fine young adults. It was my daughter's fault to get me involved in long-distance running. Are there any, cross-country or track runners here? Okay, you're not very excited about it, but that's all right. I always made fun of runners. I teased runners. Little shorts, colorful shoes, no ball. Why would you run without a ball? Give me a ball and I'll run. No ball, no run. That was the rule. But she wanted to run together, and I thought, okay, you want to spend some time alone with your dad? Let's go for it. So I bought some shoes, and I got hooked. I started running ultra marathons. Those are races for guys too stupid to stop at 26 miles. So I just kept running 50K, 60K up and down the mountains of Oregon. Absolutely loved it. Speaking of mountains, this was not my best day. And as Yang said, fishing has always been a great love, and this was a pretty good day on the Columbia River. All right. Now, I show you those pictures not to do a Facebook page, but to simply establish the fact that as a 47-year-old guy, I was healthy. I had never spent a day in the hospital since birth. I had good genetics. My mother lived to be 96. I had no reason to be concerned. I thought I was taking good care of myself, especially if you include ice cream as one of the basic food groups. Can I get an amen? So I didn't have any reason to be concerned when I noticed that I had a little rash on my body. I blamed my wife. Sorry, honey. I thought she had changed the laundry detergent, but she hadn't. But by the end of the week, I was literally too weak to drive a car. Something was attacking my muscles, and your passengers get a little nervous when your legs are too weak to go from the gas over to the brake, and so you have to take your hands off the steering wheel to get your leg over there. Then passengers get a little nervous about that, and it just kept going downhill from there. I became profoundly weak. Something was hitting the muscles from forehead all the way down to my toes. My muscles were becoming very weak. And then it got worse. My organs, my systems started to shut down. I was unable to process or digest or do anything with food, and I ballooned. I went in the hospital weighing 190 and ballooned to 260 pounds, and they had to put me on various forms of life support. Joanna was rushed into the room 5 times because if you want to see your husband one last time, you better get here right now because he's not responding. 5 days I was unconscious, and then when I came out of consciousness, when I came back to consciousness, that was the first time I realized I really am sick. And I'd play through various scenarios in my head in the hospital there in Oregon, and I would think through, well, if this happens, I'll die. But if I die, I'll be with Jesus. But if this happens, I'll die. But if I die, I'll be with Jesus. No matter what bad scenario I could come up with, I always ended up with Jesus. Now, how good is that? It's a sweet thing to be on your deathbed and for death to be the least of your worries. Then they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They did 2 muscle biopsies, a spinal tap, skin biopsies, blood draws, put me through every machine in the entire building trying to figure out what was wrong, and they couldn't figure it out. And so they started throwing different drugs at me just to kind of try to experiment. And some of them, well, let me just say it this way. The tap dancers on the wall were really cool. You would have liked those guys. But the fish that were swimming in the curtains, you know how there's those privacy curtains, privacy curtain, really. But anyway, fish were swimming in those curtains, black fish about this big, and they wanted to bite me. Now, if one of them bit me, it was no big deal. It was just like a little nip. But if 2 of them bit you at the same time, it was like sending an electrical shock through your system, and you died. And I really didn't mind dying, but I didn't want to die by fish bite. I thought that would be a really weak way to die, But their weakness was that if you squeezed those fish, they'd pop. And I wanted my son, Andrew, 6'2", 200 pounds, to come and visit me because I knew he'd be a good fish popper. Do you know the difference between a bad dream and a hallucination? In a bad dream, you wake up and you say, whew, that was awful. And hallucination, you wake up and you say, honey, we got to do something about this. Do you know who those nurses are? They've been imported into the United States of America with these nurses that have human upper bodies and styrofoam lower bodies, which I was really jealous of as a long-distance runner because I thought it'd be really cool to have legs that I didn't have to feed, But after about 5 days, Joanna said, he's talking really weird. Well, I'd be released from the hospital 77 days later with the statement, you stumped us all. We'll have to call it the Stumbo Syndrome. Now, I really don't have a disease named after me, but it was their way of saying, we ran every test that we got. We have no idea what's wrong with you, but you're not dying anymore, so go home. I told you I went into the hospital weighing 190. I came out at 140. I had lost 50 pounds of muscle and was placed into the care of my wife, who took her wedding vows seriously. We were young when we got married, and frankly, we had no idea what we were saying when we said in sickness and in health. But she took those vows seriously. And I celebrate her for that. Anyone who is willing to not only love through the easy times, but love through the hard times, knows what love really is. And she became my caregiver. I couldn't take care of myself, dressing myself, using the bathroom. I couldn't do anything for myself. I was so weak. Yet she became my caregiver. I used to bench over 200 pounds with my son. Now I got back into physical therapy, and they gave me a 1-pound dumbbell. It looked like a dog biscuit. But it was a workout. And I have to say that we have a part in our own healing journey. There's some things that others can do for you, like physical therapists. You know who a physical therapist is? It's a caregiver trained by the Navy SEALs. Anyway, there's some things that others can do for you. There's some things that only God can do. But in your healing journey, there's some things that you have to participate in. And for me, it was one of the things is getting into therapy. I never knew that I could be released from the hospital without the ability to eat. But your swallow is a function of dozens of nerves and muscles. You've got saliva in your mouth right now that you suddenly become awkwardly aware of. For you to get that saliva to the back of your throat, for the epiglottis to open, to go down, for the esophagus to open, there's dozens of nerves and muscles that have to work in perfect synchronization for that to happen, and mine completely ceased to function. I had no ability to swallow, and so they punched a hole in my stomach, put a tube in there, gave me a syringe, and then 7 cans a day of 2 words which should never be put together: medical, food. Which is it? Is it medicine or is it food? But this was breakfast, this was lunch, this was dinner, this was my drink, this was my medication. If it didn't go in the body, if it didn't go in the tube, it didn't go in the body because my swallow was completely non-functioning. You notice that there's paper towel next to me. When I say I couldn't swallow, I mean I couldn't swallow. That included my own saliva. But you continue to generate saliva, and if you don't swallow it, it goes into your lungs. And what a rotten way to drown in your own saliva, you know? So I'd live spinning into rags and cups and paper towels and Walmart parking lots or wherever. I just had to live spinning. That was my life. 15 pieces of paper towel would be torn off at night and put by my pillow so I'd have something to spit in the night, because your body continues to generate saliva at night. You don't even think about it, although you might drool on your pillow a little bit sometimes, but that was 2009, the entire year of 2009. Not a single bite of food, not a single drop of water. And at first, I was trusting God. He's driving this. We're gonna conquer this somehow together. I would open the Bible almost every day. But as the months wore on, my strength started to wear down. And I'm going to say something you've never heard a preacher say. But during 2009, I would continue to open the Bible, but it started to feel like sandpaper to my soul. Abrasive, irritating, just rubbing me the wrong way. I wasn't finding God. God, where are you? I can't find you. I used to love talking to him on a long run or spending time alone with him on some trail in the forest. I used to love talking, giving sermons about him. But now I couldn't find him. God, where are you? A friend would call me up on the phone and say, John, you were run over by a truck. Wham, you were nailed. Where you come from? Kansas, Minnesota, California. Where you come? What do you call things on the road that are run over by a truck? Roadkill, yes. That became my picture of my life, that I was that raccoon. Jesus, I need a different picture. The things that we think up here can feel accurate, but be very unhelpful, very unmotivating. Jesus, I need a different picture. Can we agree together tonight that he's the God who answers old prayers, not just the ones you prayed in the last 10 minutes? Have you ever had this happen? You had some issue that you were concerned about, and some friends gathered around you, and they prayed for you, and you didn't feel anything. You didn't feel any different, and the prayer time's done, and they walk away, and you're tempted to think, well, I guess that didn't work. We give our milk 2 weeks. Why do we only give our prayers 10 minutes? He's the God who answers old prayers, not just the ones you prayed in the last few minutes. I prayed, Lord, I need a different picture. He didn't answer that prayer right away. I'm struggling. Can't find God, confused about what's going on. And the doctors have completely given up hope on my swallow. 4 times they ran tests to show me on a TV screen what I knew to be true, that my swallow didn't work at all. 2 of those tests were at an ear, nose, throat doctor. If you ever get to go to one of these guys or ladies, they're pretty fascinating. They have this flexible hose with a camera and a light on the end of the hose that they'll run up your nose if you'll let them. I flinched a little bit when he brought the tube towards me, and he said, oh, I do this to 5-year-olds, you'll be fine. That's doctor speak for man up, buddy. He ran the hose up the nose, gave me a guided tour of places I never wanted to see. He gets to the back of the throat, and he groaned, and he said, oh, you don't have injury, and you don't have cancer. That's bad news. I could fix those 2 things. What you have is inoperable in both senses of that word. There's no operation that can fix it, and it's completely non-operating. It's inoperable. In other words, we got nothing we can do for you. During this time of, God, where are you? I had to resign from my role as pastor of the church. I was too weak to lead, too weak to preach. I had to practice, because all these are muscles. All these things that I'm using now to say these words, these are all muscles, and I had to practice these really hard words like Bible, beetle, battle, stumbo. My own name was difficult for me to say. They asked me at the church if I'd come back and preach. In just a moment, we're going to show a video clip of when I came back. What you're not going to be able to see in the video is that I'm standing behind a walker and the feeding tube is hiding under the shirt. You won't see those things. You will see a spit rag come out of my pocket, so I've got something to spit my saliva into. But what I really want you to look at is not the physical stuff, but I want you to see one man's wrestling with faith in the middle of a very confusing time. This last 2 minutes, watch this video.
I don't really like the journey I'm on. But I want you to know God is in it, and God is good. God is in this journey, and God can only be good. He is to me forever praised. Some of you don't like the journey you're on either right now. You're in a tough spot. Economically, hard time. Physically, bad news. Relationally, tough situation. Emotionally, struggling. Please know that He, according to Psalm 139, according to Psalm 139, he is the God of the light and the darkness. Too much American theology is of the God of the light only. But the scripture is clear that he's the God of the day and the night, the light and the dark, the victory and the battle. Job didn't like his situation. Jeremiah didn't like his life circumstance. Jesus didn't like being in the garden. I don't like my situation. But God is in it, and God is good. So, if you understood any of that, congratulations.
I used to preach long sermons about God. Now I was reduced to one sentence. God's in this. God's good. That's all I know. Do you see how this fits the theme of our conference, the supremacy of Jesus, and whether he's like supreme in your life or not? I had given my heart to Christ. I had a wrestling as a young man, but then I came as a 15-year-old to say, yes, he's going to be my Lord, my master, my king, my ruler. And life was good for a long time. Yeah, there's some things that happen that are confusing along the way, but I knew that Jesus was in charge and that he was good. But I get to this point in 2009, and I'm wrestling. God, can't find you. Where are you? I'm just roadkill. I wish I had a different picture. What's going on? The Bible's so irritating. In his kindness, months later, he gave me a little picture right up here. I didn't see it with my eyes, but right in my head. It only lasted for a second and a half, but it was very clear, and it was this. I saw hands that were working a piece of pottery on a wheel that was going round and round. Looked like a nice pot to me. The artist had done a good job, but all of a sudden I saw those hands take that clay and go shh, and take it right back down to the base. The artist didn't pick up the clay and throw it away. No, the wheel was still spinning. The clay was still on the wheel, but that artist was doing a do-over on that work of art. God, is that my story? Yes. But I like the old pot. I like the running, preaching, eating John. I don't like the sitting, spitting, silent John. But God, if your hands are still on my life, then I had a 2-word answer. I'm in. I'm in. I didn't know if I'd ever preach another sermon. I didn't know if I'd ever run another mile. I didn't know if I'd ever eat another piece of pizza or hamburger or anything. All I knew was that God was doing a do-over in me and that he wasn't done working in me. Is it possible that his hands are still in my life? Is it possible that he's still behind the wheel, even though everything has been really confusing? Here's my point. At some place in your Christian journey, you're going to doubt whether God is really involved in your story or not. And I'm here to say, he's not done writing a good story in your life. It might be a confusing chapter. You might not like the chapter, but he's not done writing a good story in your life. His hands are still on you. He's still at work within you. This is a messy world. Sin has made this world full of violence and ugliness and revenge and bitterness and wars and rape and incest and awful things that just rip this beautiful planet and these beautiful people apart. But God's not done yet. He's not done in this world. He's going to come back and make everything right. And he's not done in your life, working in you. I believe that with all my heart. Do not walk away from God just because it got complicated. Your faith is about ready to be taken into four-wheel drive. You've been flying down the road, cruise control, doing your thing, everything's fine, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a confusing place. It's time for four-wheel drive, Jeep, off-road faith. Not all of the Christian life is to be lived at 70 miles an hour on cruise control. Okay, it's all good, every once in a while. No. It's time to go about a half mile an hour, bouldering. Well, I need to fast forward this story because some of you are curious where this thing goes, right? Okay. Well, 2009 finished, not a bite of food, not a drop of water. 2010 came along. The doctors had no hope for my swallow, but I was finally able to be strong enough in my legs and arms to drive a car. Whew. A whole year of Joanna driving me around, that was a marriage test for both of us. Believe me, she doesn't like to drive and I don't like to be driven, especially the day we're at the stoplight, Salem, Oregon, Dodge Green Caravan, the window down. I'm in the passenger seat on a nice summer day waiting at the red light. Great big red pickup pulls up next to us. You know the kind of pickup I'm talking about, great big tires. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, you know, this Oakland Raiders bumper sticker on the back kind of thing. And this big guy looks over at me in the passenger seat and he says, "Dude, you're in the wrong seat, man. Get over there where you belong." It's like, "Oh, you're killing me, you redneck." But after a whole year, I was finally strong enough to drive, and our son was graduating from Crown College in Minnesota, and we decided to make a road trip out of it. This is a geography test right now. We decided to make a road trip and go from Oregon to Minnesota by way of Tennessee. Thank people along the way who had prayed for us and just get some time, because I had been in that house for a year and a half and was finally free to get out. And so, all right. Packed 9 cases of the medical food in the back of the car so I'd have something to live on as we drove. And we made our way through Denver and Kansas and got over to St. Louis. And that morning, as I'm having breakfast, right? My feeding tube stuck. Like, there was no way to get anything in the syringe. I had liquid in there, but it wasn't flowing into my stomach. It was stuck, and that was no big deal. They give you a little plunger for moments like that. So you can picture the syringe and a plunger. Now, you want to do this gently because it's like power washing your stomach lining, so you want to do it gently, but it didn't work. So I pushed as hard as I could. It didn't go. Joanna came back in the room. I said, "Honey, my feeding tube's stuck. You got to help me." She pushed. It didn't go. I said, "You got to push as hard as you can." I'm in a roller desk chair. There's a sliding glass door behind me. My wife is pushing so hard, her muscles are quivering. I think, oh boy, if this thing blows, it's going to blow me right out that sliding glass door. But it didn't go. We couldn't force it. We poured Pepsi in there to try to dissolve what was ever going on. Nothing works. Like, oh, great. Here I am, half a nation away from my doctors. My only source of hydration, medication, and nutrition is completely blocked. What do I do now? We cleaned up the mess, held each other in the parking lot, and prayed one of the weakest prayers of our lives. Really? Got in the car, we're heading down the road. Why didn't you go to a doctor? Well, number one, I just needed some time to pray and think. And number two, I had no idea where a doctor was. And so, just drive for a while. I looked over and like Hannah in the Old Testament, Joanna's tears are coming down her face as she prays silently. She's calling out to God for me. As we drove, she reaches over, and as she had done many times before, she put her hand on my throat. She had done that many times before. But all of a sudden that day, I felt a little twinge, a twitch, like a nerve firing or something right here. I hadn't felt anything there in a year and a half, and all of a sudden I felt something right here. Could it be that on the day that my feeding tube was stuck, half a nation away from my doctors, a year and a half, this is 18 months into the story, a year and a half of not eating anything, totally given up by the doctors? Could it be that on this day God would heal me? Really? I did something at that moment. The doctors are like, no, not liquids. The doctors don't like it when you try liquids because they go right into your lungs, and the doctors consider it poor medical practice when you sip orange juice into your lungs. But I took a little sip of orange juice and felt that go all the way down, and little burp came all the way back up. Life was returning to the system. We pulled over to Casey's gas station in Grayville, Illinois, and took the spit cup that I'd been traveling with. Now, I had never drank an ounce out of that cup. I had spit gallons into it. You wanted to be careful when you rode with Joanna and I. Joanna's Diet Coke in one cup holder, my spit cup in the other cup holder. You don't want to mix up those bad boys. We held each other in that Casey's parking lot and declared, greater is he that is in me than the disease that attacks me. Threw away the spit cup, never had to use it again. Now Joanna is driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and I've got 4 ounces of Yoplait, red raspberry yogurt that I get to eat. I'm eating it. I can't believe it. I'm actually eating. It's been 18 months. I'm actually eating. It's going down. I get to the bottom. I can see plastic. I haven't eaten since the Bush administration, and I can now see plastic at the bottom of this yogurt cup. We pulled over at a rest stop, had a guy take a picture of us, didn't even tell him why. We were so excited. He's probably still wondering, what was that all about? Next stop, Wendy's. Bought the biggest Frosty that they'd sell me. Finished the night off with a bowl of chili. And woke up the next morning without a single spit rag, spit towel, spit anything. Had slept through the night for the first time in a year and a half without the need to spit. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for praising Jesus with me, because it was really irritating after this happened. A few things happened. I was getting my feeding tube removed, right? I don't need that thing anymore because I'm eating now, right? And the nurse taking it out said, I say, this doesn't happen very often, does it? That you take one out and without putting a new one in? He said, no, this is very rare. And I told him the story that I just told you. And he responded, well, it just goes to show that the body has an amazing way of healing itself. What? Didn't you hear what I just said? So thank you for honoring Jesus with me. The word got back right as I started eating. The word got back that Stumbo's eating. And remember that ear, nose, throat doctor that gave me the hose up the nose? Quote, who gave him permission to eat? He knew I was going to kill myself. He knew my condition. But by the time we still had a lot, we had to get to Tennessee and back to Minnesota and Montana. You can eat a lot of cheesecake between, all those states, right? a lot of Wendy's Frosties. I got back, and he set up an appointment for me, and he was ready to give me the lecture of my life. I saw it when I walked into his office. He was ready to give me this big lecture, you're going to kill yourself lecture. I'd already gained 15 pounds. I hadn't gained a single pound on that medical food. Now I came in, I had spring in my step, I had life, I had vitality, and I watched him just go whoosh. And he said, John, if there had been a medical miracle waiting for you at Harvard or Mayo, we would have sent you there, but there was nothing medicine could do. This can only be attributed to God. I knew that, but it was nice to hear the doctor say it. As I bring this to a close, and the worship team comes back and leads us in a cool song, at the cross, I surrender my life. I give all to you. I give all to you. I'm not concerned whether you remember my story or not. What I'm concerned about is that this week, as you're here on Wheaton campus, as you're here at this event, this week, would you see with new eyes that the God of this universe, Jesus Christ, the Supreme One, is writing a good story in your life. Yes, there may be some confusing chapters. Yes, that story is written in a violent, upheaval world that is full of conflict and tension. Yes, this is a broken, messed up world, but the King of the universe wants to be king of your life. Let him drive. He's not done writing a good story in your life, even though this chapter might be confusing to you. He is king. He is good. And if you let him lead, you'll be an old dude like me giving praise, because it's a good life. Thank you for letting me speak to you.